Hi, everybody. Joe Cioffi here on this Tuesday, April the 3rd, 2018. And we're just a couple of minutes past the hour of 6 o'clock. Let me run through a couple of things. Got a very, very busy weather night and a lot to talk about. So before I do that, I just want to tell you that one of the things that I started last night is that we have the Joe Cioffi show. That is usually on at 9:15 on Facebook. So if you don't have access to Facebook, I am uploading that show onto YouTube and posting that video. It's probably not going to happen until a little bit after midnight Eastern time, but the show, the Joe and Joe show, is going to be up there for viewing on a nightly basis. And of course, you could always join us live at 9:15 over on the Facebook side. The weather is just crazy. There is so much happening with the weather systems just rolling one after another. And tonight, to start off with the Storm Prediction Center's activity chart here showing where the risk of severe weather is, and they actually added, and rightfully so, given what's going on the radars during this afternoon, an area of moderate risk of severe weather for the states that border each other here: Missouri, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, and of southeastern Illinois, on up in through much of the southern half of Indiana, and on north and east into parts of Ohio. Now, through all of this, we've got tornado watches up in this large area in red that runs from Arkansas. There's actually a second line of storms. There's two lines of thunderstorms here. The second one is firing up on the southern end of that in northeastern Texas and northwestern Louisiana, parts of southwestern Arkansas. We have a severe thunderstorm watch that is up. So very busy severe weather night. Kind of suspected yesterday that there was going to be quite the outbreak here. And indeed, that is the case. Now, I want to just go to the actual radar, and then we're going to talk about the severe weather risk for Wednesday. So let's bring this up front and center. Pretty busy. Here's that, the first line of storms. You have a snaking line of storms. They were actually stronger earlier. They've weakened just a little bit, and they've moved into parts of southwestern Ohio into southeastern Indiana. But go back to the west from just south of Chicago, running southwestward from there over St. Louis, cutting through Arkansas on a diagonal here into northeastern Texas. It's from that line that the Storm Prediction Center is reacting to with respect to the tornado watches that are up, and that is moving eastward. So I'm expecting that line to hold together pretty well as we go through the next number of hours here. Meanwhile, it's snowing across much of southeastern Minnesota, across Wisconsin, and through much of central and northern Michigan, and anywhere from 6 to as much as 12 inches of snow will accumulate there. In the northeast, it's just been really a cold rain with a little bit of wintry mix on the northern fringe in some places, but it's been just basically a cold rain here. They're playing the Yankee game right now with temperatures in the upper 30s. I don't know how they're doing it, and more importantly, I don't know how the folks are sitting in there dealing with all this. So busy radar tonight and a lot of severe weather to pay attention to. Now, as far as tomorrow is concerned, I will bring up the Storm Prediction Center's area of risk, and they've actually updated this late today and added an area of slight risk of severe weather from just touching southernmost New Jersey down through the Delmarva Peninsula, eastern Virginia, eastern North Carolina, and then a larger area of marginal risk that runs up into northern New Jersey just to about New York City, covers southeastern Pennsylvania, maybe borderline back to about Lancaster, Harrisburg, up into much of the eastern part of Maryland, eastern Virginia, down through north South Carolina and northeastern Georgia, and general thunderstorms extend a bit further north than that. So looks like the Storm Prediction Center is kind of going a little more bullish with severe weather here in the east on Wednesday as this weather front moves eastward. And I think it's pretty justified considering what's going on in terms of what's on the radar at the moment. Here is a close-up view with respect to the Northeast tonight, which is my neck of the woods. You know, we've had a very miserable day. I think that's the best way to describe it. It's just been a miserable day. The first area of main rain has now moved on up into southern and central New England. It's still raining through much of southern New York State down to about New York City. There are some heavier downpours moving across southern Pennsylvania into southern New Jersey at the moment this evening, but that area is going to weaken a bit as it moves eastward. And of course, there's no severe weather to worry about here. We're waiting for a warm front that's going to push northward and start to bring in some warmer temperatures to get us out of the 30s and hopefully get us at least into the 50s, if not the 60s. At least that is the goal. Let me go to the watches, by the way, because there are a lot of them tonight, watches and warnings. So in yellow, the tornado watches that are up tonight from much of the state of Arkansas, north and east, through southern Illinois, southern Indiana, southwestern Ohio. The pink area here, the salmon color, I guess that's what you would call it, that's the severe thunderstorm watch. We also have various wind advisories and high wind warnings up for parts of the Northeast. We've got freeze warnings and mostly freeze warnings up for southwestern Missouri back over in through Oklahoma. As you know, we've seen a lot of these areas, they've been rather warm of late in some places, and as a result, now of course we're going into the growing season, so we're going to have freeze issues. Up to the north, the winter storm warnings that are up for southern Minnesota, northernmost Iowa, much of central and northern Wisconsin, except the northernmost part of the state, under an advisory, as is the upper peninsula of Michigan. Winter weather advisories, winter storm warnings up through the northern third of Michigan. And in Maine and in New Hampshire, northern New Hampshire, winter weather advisories, and those extend up into Maine with winter storm warnings up in northernmost Maine. Out in the west, really not too much happening here. A few flood watches up because we're getting ready for what's going to be a hefty storm coming in to the western part of the U.S. Now, let's look at where we're going with all this, because we have this very, very dynamic pattern that is setting up, it's been set up really, and we are going to see several weather systems in play here as we move into next week. Now, each one is this is not like the middle of January where you could make certain assumptions about snow and accumulations. Obviously, it's early April. There are a lot more variables in play, which we have discussed ad nauseum over the last couple of days. So it's going to be important to pay attention to, as far as snow accumulations are concerned, if they happen. We're going to have to pay attention to time of day, the urban heat island effect, the sun angle, of course, if it falls during the daytime, and we also need to remember that snow intensity, rate of snowfall is going to trump all those things. So if you're snowing at a moderate clip or heavier, that is visibility, say, at a half a mile or less, with snows accumulating at least at a rate of about an inch an hour, that is going to trump a lot of all those other factors, and you would see accumulating snow in the daytime. If you don't get that, if you get the snow, steady snow during the day, and you do not get those intensities, then it is likely not to stick during the daytime except on the coldest of surfaces, in which case it really is not that problematic. So here's our storm system for Wednesday. I'm going to jump to the short-range RGEM model here because we want to take a look at the extent of the strong thunderstorms that we have to deal with. And notice, it's a pretty impressive-looking line that the model generates tonight at 8 o'clock from much of Indiana, central and northeast Indiana down into southeastern Missouri, and then this is that second line, of course, and then another separate line in northwestern Louisiana and into northeastern Texas. So that is going to move eastward. I think we can get a little closer. And as we move into the overnight, that line really does hold together during the early morning hours, especially the southern part of that line. And then it starts to weaken a little bit as we head toward daybreak, but it's going to fire up again during the day tomorrow, so I can now jump a little closer. And this really, you've got really strong dynamics here in play with this very deep low that's moving up into Lake Huron, a 983 low there. That's a pretty strong storm. You have a rather impressive upper air with tropical air moving up the eastern seaboard. The marine layer should get displaced, a strong southwest gradient here, so winds are going to be picking up. And now as we move into the afternoon, so this is at 2 o'clock tomorrow, you're starting to see a line of storms develop. Looks like the RGEB may have shifted a little bit further to the east, with more of an emphasis of the stronger thunderstorms to the south. You can see them firing up there in Virginia. The timing of this front is critical because if the front's a little bit faster, these thunderstorms may fire up a bit further to the east. I want to take a look at the NAM. Let's look at the NAM 3 kilometer because I think this is probably going to be should work well here. And you can see the NAM 3 kilometer does fire that line up a bit faster. This is at noon on Wednesday, and it already has a fairly well-developed line of storms moving through eastern Pennsylvania and in through New Jersey. Very narrow line here of strong thunderstorms. The key for areas on Long Island and in southern New England is if the marine layer gets displaced, because the cool marine air stabilizes the atmosphere, causes these thunderstorms to weaken as they move east. That may or may not happen. If the dynamics aloft are strong enough, these thunderstorms could hold together a bit better. You can see they kind of break apart a bit as we go into Wednesday evening, and then the line really fires up once it gets out far offshore, where you start to get into the warmer waters of the Gulf Stream and they get involved. So there goes that line of storms. We then proceed to Wednesday night into Thursday as weather conditions begin to improve, but we're going to see colder air as well moving in to the northeast. And I'll jump back to the RGEM model because now we're going to start to pay attention to weather system number 1, which is going to approach for later Thursday night into Friday. This is going to be, I think, the weakest of the next 3. You start to see snow firing up across Iowa and Illinois here on Thursday, moving south of Chicago. Actually, it looks like Chicago gets into a little bit of snow. And, of course, as far out as we can go here is Thursday evening. So we'll jump to the NAM now to carry us the rest of the way. And you can see how the NAM handles this. It fires up. It's a low that develops and moves into southern Michigan over Lake Erie. There's a bit of a warm front that extends from the low southward, so there'll probably be an area of snow or mixed precipitation or even some rain down near the coast by early Friday morning. This, I don't think, looks to be a big deal. That low kind of rides across upstate New York, looks like right along I-90, so much of the snow shifts to the north. And now we've got system number 2 coming into the picture. This is by 2 a.m. Saturday, low pressure in northeastern Arkansas, and we've got snow. The NAM is a little bit further to the north than the GFS, and kind of lines up okay with the European model, but I think that this is going to wind up being kind of like Monday's system when we were looking at it late last week, where the models had it, then it disappeared, then when it reappeared, it had it more to the south in the mid-Atlantic states, and as we got closer and closer to the event, we started seeing this gradual shift to the north, and the GFS has, kind of pushed the New York area, New York, New Jersey, on the edge of this. This is Saturday afternoon with the edge of snow over Long Island, northern New Jersey. You can see the darker blue snows here on the GFS down in southern New Jersey, back through Delaware, Maryland, and in through Virginia and West Virginia. But it's been the tendency lately for these things to be further north as we get closer in time, and the European model actually has the northern fringe of the precipitation shield here further north than the GFS has. So I think that's worthy of attention here. That low moves out, then we get a break, although cold, for Sunday and Monday, and lo and behold, here comes the next weather system, low pressure on Monday, on the GFS anyway, moving into eastern Kentucky. The primary dies out, the secondary develops. Now this is going to be very interesting to see how it plays. This is a throwback to the storms that we had back in March, where we had blocking in play. We don't exactly have that now, but is the primary low going to die out and the secondary low completely take over? Because if that's the case, you can bet that the area here to the north is going to be colder, and that the boundary between rain and snow could wind up being further south. So that's something we're going to be watching very closely. I will tell you, by the way, that there's a distinct difference between what the GFS is doing and what the European is doing. Now, I want you to look at, this is close enough, but I want you to look at the structure of the upper air here. In fact, I think what I can do is, let me see if I can bring this up so we can do a little drawing, because this is an important factor, I believe, that we need to look for in the coming days as this whole mess just evolves. And this is for 2 a.m. Wednesday morning. Come on, save. There we go. All right, just give me 1 second here, and I'll bring it up on the screen in the paint box, because this way I can draw on it. And of course, everything is not responding at top speed, but you do the best with what best you can. All right, so making some progress here. And all right, now stand by, folks. There are, on the GFS at least, there are two distinct shortwave troughs here in this setup. And that is the big difference between it and the European. So when we look at this, and I will draw it here for you. There we go. So there's two short waves here. Here's the first, right there, and here's the second one behind it, okay? And the GFS seems to want to split. Did this on the prior run as well, where it's splitting shortwave energy as it moves eastward. There's a lead shortwave trough, and then there's this second shortwave trough behind it. We also have, by the way, a ridge out in the west, so that P&A index is probably going to go positive. The Pacific North America index is going to go positive, and there's enough ridging along the east coast as well, so that you're going to wind up taking some kind of system. If the one on Saturday goes out well to the south, this one will probably be able to track, much further to the north, rather than go in, out to sea. And I'm banking on that first system, by the way, as I said earlier. I'm banking on that first system to not take the out to sea route, but in fact coming up further north than what the model is suggesting. Now, I want to show you the difference, though, between that and the European for just about the same time frame, because this is very significant, and that is that the European model, let's bring that up, Euro 168. So this is for 8 a.m. Whereas the GFS is for 2 a.m. It's 6 hours later, but it's not going to make a difference. If I had the exact time, it's still going to be the same. The GFS has the split maxes. But here's the European's view in the upper air, and you see the difference here. It's not a split max. It's one. Split shortwaves. It's one shortwave, basically. That northern shortwave is phased with that southern system, so it looks like that lead shortwave on the European is slower, and the second one catches up to it. So this creates a much more dynamic scenario in the east for the eastern part of the United States. If you've got this, phased look here that the model is suggesting, because that is going to allow for coastal development right off the Carolinas and Virginia, and this could be, something important. I'm not sure whether we're going to have, something very strong. There are obviously other things that we're going to have to look at as we get closer, but this, more phased look. The ridge in the west is fairly impressive here, and the question for the west is also going to be the fact that you've got a system crashing into the west coast. So is that ridge going to hold on as the trough in the east tries to lift up? So this opens the possibility up for a third system to come into play as we head toward Monday and Tuesday of next week. And by the way, the European is slower, so the European would suggest that we would have issues here more along the lines of later Tuesday and Wednesday rather than later Monday night into Tuesday. So the only thing I will say, and that is the European, as we know, has not been the best performing model this winter and in the last few months. So I'm kind of suspect about whatever it does. And the GFS has been a little bit more consistent in how the long range is playing out. It might not get the details right when, in terms of the specifics that far out, but it seems to have been getting the general idea of the overall pattern. And I kind of want to stay with that model until proven otherwise. The European one of these days is going to come back to life. I don't know when that is, but it certainly hasn't happened so far. Now, let's go back to the surface map, and I will pull up the whole U.S. because I want to talk about what's going on in the western part of the United States, because we do have a rather important storm coming into the west beginning late Thursday, and you've got, heavy rains moving into Northern California, Oregon, and Washington, some hefty snows in through the northern Rockies, down through Wyoming and into Nebraska and Kansas. Low pressure drops down into New Mexico, so maybe some snow even for the eastern half of Colorado. And now that snow extending eastward across Kansas and southern Nebraska and Missouri. I don't think they've gotten much snow in St. Louis this winter, but if this is right, you've got a chance for this coming up Friday night into Saturday. Now, bear in mind that the NAM for this time frame is already showing signs of being further north than the GFS. Okay, so that's an important thing to recognize here, that the NAM may be, onto something again. The NAM has been the best performer of all the models in the last couple of months. We know that over and over again. We saw it happen on Monday again. So I'm going to be very, very, it's going to take a lot of convincing for me to move away from it. Meanwhile, out in the west, Friday night into Saturday, the second wave is a deep low. You can't really see it too well, but there's a deep low offshore the Pacific Northwest. And meanwhile, you see the system here in the east. That comes in, and here comes that third system for early next week. Again, the GFS has this faster because of the split energy, and it develops that secondary low, still holds on to a bit of a primary, but develops that secondary low, and would probably mean for some significant snows for at least the interior. Now, whether it will be cold enough down along the coast is going to depend on a lot of other factors that we can't even begin to determine yet, and we don't even know how this is going to play out. Anyhow, let's pull the west up so we can at least look at what's offshore the Pacific Northwest and what's coming in to the west. And there's that first wave of rain. Then a pretty solid wave of rain Friday into Friday night into central and southern California, and some heavy rains and on Saturday into Saturday night throughout from California all the way up into the Northwest, and then conditions start to improve as things dry out there. So very, very dynamic pattern in the upper atmosphere into early next week. What I'm kind of hoping for is that after we get through whatever happens with the third system, so we've got this Thursday night into Friday, the weak one, the second one for Saturday into Saturday night, moderate one, and then the third one for early next week, either Monday night, Tuesday, or Tuesday night, Wednesday, depending on which model's got the upper air structure better defined. I'm hoping that after that we see some kind of decisive break in this pattern. I mean, that's what I'm hoping. So let's at least look at the long-range upper air from the prior run. So here's that trough for the middle of next week, which the European, by the way, was so much more dynamic on it. Here's the how the GFS handles this, just kind of like an open trough that moves along, but because of the phasing that the European attempted, we've got a wrapped up cutoff low here on the European that develops and then swings out to the east. So that's an important difference. And then after that goes by, the European wants to at least attempt to build a ridge in the east and a trough in the west. Now, the GFS doesn't quite go that route, or maybe it did. Let's take a look. I didn't even look at the long range on the GFS from earlier, but it does maybe have a little bit more troughing in the east before it does eventually try to bring a ridge up along about mid-month. And then you've got these weather systems swinging in from the west, still coming in one after another. But I would say that after that third system, it doesn't look like we have as much of a cold connection from Canada going into the second half, at least as we head into the middle part of the month and a bit beyond that. Maybe we'll see temperatures trend closer to average instead of running 10 to 15 or 20 degrees below average, as we've seen in some cases here. Over to the other side, and we can take a look at what's going on for our friends over in Europe, as there's been a bit of a last gasp of snow across Scotland during today and tonight and on into Wednesday. Low pressure moving across England with some hefty rains for much of England, France, and through the Netherlands. Then that low plays out, and then we've got another Atlantic storm that impacts the area Friday night into Saturday, and then some more on and off showers into next week. Looks like a bit of a storm for the Mediterranean Sea as we move into the early part of next week. So maybe we're finally done. Maybe you guys may finally be done with these last-minute snows. The snowfall map, and then I'll come back to the U.S. You can see the impact of the snow from northern England and into Scotland, where there are some 20 and 30-inch centimeter amounts. But again, much of this is front-loaded. I've got the map up out through day 8, which is April 11th. So much of that is going to be front-end loaded. Back home we go, and this is a pretty active snowfall forecast map for the month of for the first half of the month of April. I mean, we'll take it to April 13th. I mean, this is quite a bit of snow considering the time of year. Look how far south, if the GFS is right with these southern tracks, look how far south the extent of snow is. I wouldn't take these numbers literally, but it does reflect the kind of pattern we're in with respect to the weather in the east being much colder than average, and of course with these the frequencies of these snow events. I have said many times, you know, the idea of the trend being your friend is so important, and you want to stay with that. But you also, as far as snow is concerned, you know, it's always been my experience in years where it snows a lot, it always seems to find a way to do it, and that's what's happening right now in the Northeast and in the parts of the northern Mid-Atlantic states. Now, as we look at accumulated precip over the next 10 days or so, it's pretty hefty in the west. I mean, some really big amounts of over a foot of rain in many locations up in the Pacific Northwest and several inches through much of central and northern California. Also, a considerable amount of precip over the next 10 days on the order of several inches in parts of the east. Some of this is going to be thunderstorm driven, but it does represent an active period, and of course still very dry in West Texas and in parts of New Mexico, and doesn't look like, and down through parts of the Southwest, so that doesn't look like it's going to be breaking down anytime soon. So very, very active and very, very busy weather pattern indeed. It's hard to believe. I mean, I didn't expect it to be absolutely quiet around here, but it's a little bit too busy for me at the moment, making things just a little bit hectic, and trying to stay in front of these things and ahead of the game, or trying to stay at least ahead of the curve, has been a challenge, to say the least. Thank you so much, Nick Cortese and Timothy Veltman. Thank you so much. I'm going to use it for bait for fishing. I got a fishing trip coming up 2 weeks from Monday, so that's going to come in handy. Thank you so much. I appreciate your generosity, and thank you for hitting Super Chat. Let me come up to the board now. If you're just joining us, by the way, I just want to remind everybody again, the Joe and Joe show tonight at 9:15 on Facebook. But if you don't have access to Facebook, I will be uploading the Joe and Joe shows now to my YouTube channel. They'll probably, I won't be able to do that until about midnight. So you can either watch it if you're still up at that hour, or perhaps you can catch it during the morning hours on Wednesday. I'll try to keep it as current as I can, and bear that in mind. But as I know a few of you have asked, and I can't always get Joe in here for the time that I have open for my window for the YouTube channel, and I know some of you don't have access to Facebook, or aren't on Facebook, so this way you can get to see the program. Gary Vestos, our sympathies to you, by the way. So sorry about losing your best friend. Prayers and light to you. Let me check out Dear Mother Nature, says David Schwartz. I want to work on my garden. Please stop with the snow. Thank you. Love you. Dear David, I'm not Mother Nature, but I can speak for her. This is actually probably a very good time. If you want, go ahead and plant peas and lettuce, because they love the cold and they will thrive if you put that down now. If you're a regular gardener, I don't need to tell you that, but absolutely go ahead and put that down. I had one of my best lettuce crops years ago. I forgot when it was, but it was in an April like this, where it was very, very chilly, and boy, did we reap the benefits of that. It was amazing. Cynthia Guignautis, I am trying my best to make it stop. Believe me, I want it to stop. But watch for the severe weather across central and southern Indiana that is showing up on the radar. You got tornado watches up over parts of the state tonight. Let me see a few of you other questions here. Let's hope it stops by May. It better. By then the sun angle has to work. Maybe it might even work at night. I'm noticed on my Facebook page. I put up a post on my website today, meteorologistjoechaffee.com, discussing this long range and the next three systems that we're going to have to deal with. And I saw from the response, everybody's had enough. We've had double the normal snowfall in most places, and in some places even more than double. I'm at 75.4 inches for the season. My average is 32. This is my sixth consecutive winter of above average snowfall. It is time for it to end. They should not be playing Yankee games in 39-degree temperatures, which is exactly what they're doing at the moment. So we need to get this to stop. It needs to change. So maybe around mid-month we could finally get this to flip, or at least abate a bit, where we can see temperatures get back to near normal. We've actually been this way since the end of February, when we had that big polar warm-up, where temperatures up in the North Pole ran 40 to 50 degrees above normal and got above freezing, which was unheard of. That created that big blocking pattern that resulted in 4 nor'easters in the month of March. Now, I still think we are seeing the residual effects of that as the atmosphere, tries to kind of relieve all that energy, and maybe we're at the end of it. So perhaps once we get through next week, maybe whatever the models are showing for the early to middle part of next week will be the last one for a while, and we could get back to some semblance of normalcy. Besides, as I said, I want to fish, okay? And I don't want to fish outside when it's in the 30s and low 40s with low clouds and drizzle and fog or in snow. I want it to be at least sunny and temperatures up in the upper 50s and low 60s. Much easier to take. End of rant. All right, folks. Once again, just to remind you, the events going forward with respect to snow, accumulations, remember, time of day, sun angle, urban heat island effect, and so on. That's all going to, those are all factors. You want to add molten lava to that, go ahead. But snow intensity trumps all of that stuff. So if it snows during the day, if we are seeing a situation where we're going to see snow falling at rates of 1 or more inches an hour, you will see it accumulate on most surfaces, possibly even all surfaces. If it winds up being a light to occasionally moderate snow and it falls during the day, you're going to wind up seeing accumulation mainly on grassy surfaces, and even there it'll probably be a struggle. So this is going to be something that we'll pay attention to when it comes to figuring out, what are the snow implications of the systems going forward, if at all. Okay, once again, thank you, Nick Cortese, and thank you, Timothy Veltman, for hitting Super Chat tonight. Appreciate your generosity, and it will go a long way for bait for my fishing trip. Everybody else, Joe and Joe Show, join me 9:15. Join us 9:15 on Facebook, and if you missed that, I will load it up to my YouTube channel probably around midnight tonight, and you can watch it during the overnight. Great video to watch to help you sleep a little bit faster. Have a great evening, folks. We'll see you later, or if not, we'll see you tomorrow.